Good morning. It is Tuesday, the 9th of December. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this is Europe Today, Euronews' daily live fix of European news and analysis. Coming up today, after key talks in London with the UK Prime Minister and the German and French leaders, President Zelensky travelled on to Brussels for dinner with the NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte and the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen before heading over to Rome today. This as the US piles the pressure on Kyiv to cede territory to Russia. For more on the outcome of all these meetings, we're joined here in the studio by our Ukraine correspondent, Sasha Vakalina. Good morning, Sasha. Great to have you with us.
Morning.
So as I said there, President Zelensky was in Brussels last night for this dinner. How did the talks go?
Well, they had this opportunity to discuss some of the most important things and to do it, of course, during this European diplomatic tour of Volodymyr Zelensky from London to Brussels, then from Brussels to Rome today to meet Giorgia Meloni. Now, the most important things and the most critical, and these are going to be the sticking points in any sort of negotiations, would be, of course, security guarantees for Ukraine and territorial concessions, as you said, where Ukraine is being pushed to cede territory. Zelensky did speak and said that Ukraine has no right to cede territory because, of course, this is also about the millions of Ukrainians who remain in temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. What was important for him and for the European leaders was to coordinate and to align their positions and also to come up as the joint European team in any sort of negotiations because, of course, as of now, Europe is not invited to that negotiation table and Trump is not really rushing to invite Europe. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about Ukraine.
So we've been speaking to President Putin and we've been speaking to Ukrainian leaders, including Zelensky, President Zelensky. And I have to say that I'm a little bit disappointed that President Zelensky hasn't yet read the proposal. That was as of a few hours ago. His people love it, but he hasn't. Russia's fine with it. Russia, I guess, would rather have the whole country when you think of it. But Russia is, I believe, fine with it. But I'm not sure that Zelensky is fine with it. His people love it.
No mention of Europe there, no mention of the European Union, more criticism of Volodymyr Zelensky and no criticism of Russia and Vladimir Putin there, Maeve.
And interesting to see that the Americans and the US seem to be, or the Americans and the Russians, seem to be more and more on the same page. Sasha, where does that leave Ukraine?
And we saw more of it these past days with the new US strategy, didn't we, when there was a huge feedback from Russia with the Russian officials saying that they do align with this view. Former Russia's president, former Russia's prime minister, Dmitry Medvedev, he also posted on X and he was supporting those calls for the EU should be abolished coming from Elon Musk and sovereignty returned to individual countries. And we could see Medvedev saying there exactly. Now, in Moscow, the officials are really happy from the fact that Russia is no longer described as an enemy, no longer described as a threat. But who else is described now as a threat is the European Union. And this is where the US is actually blaming the European Union for what they see as blocking any sort of peace negotiations to end Russia's war against Ukraine, Maeve.
So much at stake there for Ukraine and, of course, the Europeans. Sasha Vakalina, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed there. And, of course, for more on Sasha's reporting, you can take a look at euronews.com. But now, coming up, we'll be joined here on set by the EU Economy Commissioner, Valdis Dombrovskis. The centre-right politician is on his third stint as EU Commissioner and is known back home for being Latvia's longest-serving Prime Minister, having headed up 3 different governments. Now, he's in charge here in Brussels of driving economic growth in the EU and securing, of course, financing for Ukraine. Commissioner Dombrovskis, great to have you with us here on Europe Today. Good morning.
Good morning.
So first, we heard there from Sasha Vakalina about those talks between Mark Rutte and the Commission President, but did you get filled in as well by Commission President on those talks last night with President Zelensky? How did they go?
First of all, it's clear from the European Union side, we stay committed to provide all necessary support to Ukraine and eventually to ensure just and lasting peace in Ukraine. So that remains our goal, and we continue, I would say, strong engagement with different partners to arrive at this goal.
But your goal is not being heard by President Trump. He's not taking into account how Brussels feels.
Obviously, what is important if we want also European Union, so to say, to be at the table, to be fully taken into account, is also to project strengths, to be able to change facts on the ground. That's why it's important we reach agreement on Ukraine financing. That's why it's important we continue to provide necessary military support to Ukraine. But because this is a way how we actually stay relevant and can change facts on the ground, and correspondingly also can influence any negotiations.
And how can you make sure Ukraine doesn't have to swallow a bad deal?
The stronger Ukraine will be, the more leverage it will have to ensure the acceptable terms of peace. In any case, what we want to achieve is not a capitulation of Ukraine. It's a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. Also, the peace which just does not serve as a pause for Russia to regroup, to recover, and to continue its aggression against Ukraine, or to expand its war against other countries, because Russia is openly talking about invading other countries, including EU and NATO countries.
And you mentioned, of course, the frozen Russian assets. Where do things stand there? The clock is ticking.
Last week the European Commission came forward with proposals on how we can provide financing for Ukraine for the next 2 years. Either through joint borrowing at the EU level, or through so-called reparation loan, where we use cash balances linked with immobilized Russian assets and provide a reparation loan to Ukraine, which Ukraine only would need to repay once Russia pays reparations for the damages it has created. So European Commission proposals are on table, and leaders are expected to discuss them next week.
But some leaders don't like them. I mean, there was the dinner last Friday between President von der Leyen and Friedrich Merz. Even hopped on a plane from Germany to come here to try and convince the Belgians, but it didn't work.
Indeed, Belgians have legitimate concerns, because bulk of this money is indeed in Belgium, and therefore in our proposal we also came with a strong safeguards. Other EU member states will have to provide guarantees. Also, Russia's claims cannot be enforced in the European Union, and we also came with additional safeguards, how to prevent enforcement of those claims in a third country, or how they can be offset against Russia's assets in the EU.
And you had a call with the G7 last night. Do the US and Japan actually support this reparations loan?
Indeed, I presented the reparations loan concept to G7 partners yesterday, our proposal, and it was also agreed yesterday on a principle that Russia's assets should stay immobilized until Russia pays reparations. It's also reflected in yesterday's G7 meeting conclusions.
So what happens if there's no deal? How will Ukraine survive without this money?
We have to reach the deal, and the good news is that all leaders conceptually agree that we have to find a solution, and next week is a crunch time when we have to do it.
And of course, did you read the document, the national security document that Trump penned last Friday, calling Europe weak? What are your thoughts on that document?
Certainly there are aspects on this national security strategy we disagree with. That's very clear, and it's clear that European Union is actually providing strengths for members of the European Union, especially smaller countries, because in a current more conflictual, power-based world, it's certainly you can seek strengths in unity. But there are aspects which are obviously we can agree that we could project more assertiveness as European Union, including against Russia. And also, for example, the strategy recognizes that Europe remains strategically and culturally vital for the United States. Okay,
Commissioner Dombrovskis, thank you so much for coming into us today on Europe Today. And now another story that everyone here in Brussels is talking about takes us to Czechia, where a new Prime Minister is being sworn in. After winning the elections in October, Andrej Babiš takes the reins today for the second time in his career. Take a look. Yapikianis fills us in.
Got a painkiller? Because Brussels has a new headache. First, it was Orban in Hungary. then Fico in Slovakia, and today Andrej Babiš returns as a Prime Minister of Czechia. President Petr Pavel blocked him until he agreed to transfer his massive chemical and food empire, Agrofert, to independent administrators. To rule, Babiš invited the Motorist Party, who are fierce climate skeptics, and the Freedom and Direct Democracy Party, which openly opposes the EU and NATO. So is he Orban 2.0? Well, not quite. You see, Orban is an ideologue, whereas Babiš is more of a CEO, though a populist one. In his cabinet, he keeps the majority of seats for his own people. Or in corporate terms, he just ensures he holds the controlling interests to keep the hardliners in check. Babiš talks tough on Ukraine aid, yet experts say he won't stop Czech arms factories from selling shells to Kiev. Why? Well, because it is a profitable business. He will fight the Green Deal, yes, but mostly to protect the Czech car industry, which makes up to 10% of the country's GDP and a quarter of exports. Finally, he might threaten the European House to get a better deal, but hopefully he will not burn it down. He simply owns too much expensive furniture inside it.
Jakub Janis there reporting on the new Czech Prime Minister. And now it is time to bring you up to speed on a council meeting that took place here yesterday in Brussels and saw EU countries sign off on major new plans to reform how the 27 should deal with migration. The changes were driven by the presidency of the Council of the EU, and we're pushing for a harder stance on migration. For more on the gathering, we're joined now on set by our migration reporter, Vincenzo Genovese. So quite a decisive day yesterday, Vincenzo, for migration management. Fill us in.
Yes, Maeve. Good morning. Big day indeed for migration. Yesterday, the EU ministers agreed on 3 laws aiming at speeding up asylum procedures and increasing the deportations of the people who have no right to stay in the EU. The first one, return regulation, would allow EU member states to build return hubs in non-EU countries and send there the rejected migrants. So these return hubs could be used to place migrants before they are actually transferred back to their countries of origin, like Italy is doing already with Albania, but they could also be the final destination. So this means that migrant people could end up anywhere in the world, in countries unrelated to them, provided that these countries have an agreement with a new member state and that some international rights are respected. Let's listen on this. The Danish Minister for Immigration, he was quite clear.
One of the important elements is that the connection criterion that formerly have prevented the member states for making agreements with third countries is now removed. And that makes the possibility of the member states either to make a return hub as a transit center before the irregular migrant is sent to his or her home country, or to make a return hub where you could stay.
Rasmus Stoklund there, the Danish Minister of Migration, standing alongside Magnus Brunner, the European Commissioner for Migration. Vincenzo, what does that mean then for asylum seekers arriving in the European Union?
There is a significant change also for asylum seekers. It's the change of the safe third country concept. This would allow EU countries to deport asylum seekers also to unrelated countries, provided that they can ask for asylum, that they can apply for asylum in those countries. This is something that is quite similar to the UK-Rwanda model, and it's for sure unprecedented in the history of the European Union. It breaks a taboo.
It does indeed, and we can read more of your reporting, Vincenzo, on Euronews.com. But thank you so much, Vincenzo Genovese, for that update. And thank you, of course, so much for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow again, bright and early here, for a fresh new edition of Europe Today. So don't miss it. Thanks again for watching. Take care and see you soon on Euronews.